I am back from Japan and one of the best trips of my entire life. So I thought I'd do like a morning get ready with me and talk through my Japan trip, the highlights, the tips I have if you're traveling to Japan, all of that good stuff. If you're new here, hello, I'm Dr. Sam Ellis. I'm a board certified dermatologist in Northern California, and I love all things skin and skincare and beauty and sharing my tips and tricks and educating on it. But I'm also a real person with a personal life, and sometimes I like to share a little bit of that as well. So if that sounds good to you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. So my husband and I have been trying to go to Japan since 2020. We had this trip already fully booked for May 2020, and then the world happened, and then the next year we had a baby. And so now, or in October 2023, is when we decided that finally we could execute our trip and our vision and our dream of finally going to Japan. So the first real question was, well, do we bring our son? Okay, I can't use this cleanser without doing this first. Gets me every time. Do we bring our son? Because he's 21 months and, you know, a 2-year-old on an international trip is certainly doable. I see people do it all the time, but is that optimal? Maybe for some people, maybe not for us. But since we rebooked this trip when Theo, our son, was only like 1 year old, when he was 1, we were like, he's not gonna remember, like he'll be fine without us. So we booked it without him. As the trip approached, we were like, oh gosh, like now he's turning into a real person. Like he calls us mommy and daddy, he's much more engaged. And we had this like whole guilt complex of leaving him behind. And when we were gonna leave him behind, he was gonna be left with my parents and my in-laws taking turns, also the nanny that hangs out with him every day. So he wasn't gonna be abandoned. He was gonna be with people who know him and love him and have taken care of him in the past. But we still went back and forth on it so many times. This is my cleanser from Prequel. It's so good. So we went back and forth, and my husband was talking to his work colleagues. I was talking to like all my patients. I take care of so many moms, and was like, what do you think about it? Pretty much literally every single one of my patients and parents was like, no, if you can and feel good about it, do it without your kid, because those are kind of like fleeting times in your life. And if you can have that time to like reconnect with your spouse and just sort of take time for yourself, fill your own cup, like that's really, really important. And so ultimately that is what we decided to do, to just travel with me and my husband. And it was incredible. It was really, really lovely to have that sort of just mental reset, to just have days where you're not focusing on anything but what you want to do and your own schedule. And before I had my son, I totally took that type of trip and that type of time for granted. If you've traveled without your kids before, please put your experience in the comments. I'm just kind of interested to know about that. Oh, this is the Prequel Universal Skin Solution. I couldn't bring this to Japan because this is a 4-ounce bottle. I guess I could have transferred it, but we'll make travel sizes. My rosacea went crazy in Japan, and I really think one of the reasons was because I didn't have this. This is so amazing for like sensitive, irritated skin. I will not go into talking about all the products, but since this is kind of the newest launch, I figured I'd give it a little mention here, because sometimes people are like, I don't know why you would use that. If you have irritated skin, if you have reactive skin, it's just fantastic. So we decided to go without my son, and we planned for a 10-day trip. And that was to me like the perfect amount of time. When you go so far, like across the world, I think you need at least a week. And I wanted a little bit more than that. I think if we had done a full 2 weeks, I would have missed my baby way too much. I mean, I missed him enough already, but 10 days was great. We spent half of it in Tokyo and half of it in Kyoto. And to me, that was a really nice balance. Japan is an incredible country. Already, my husband and I are thinking about like where we want to go back to, because there was so much stuff we didn't get to do. But I feel like for an introductory trip to Japan, Tokyo and Kyoto were 2 great cities to hit up. We took a direct flight out of San Francisco to Haneda, which is one of the 2 main airports you can fly into. The other one is Narita. Haneda's and sorry if I'm saying all the Japanese stuff incorrectly. I apologize. I don't want to offend anybody. Haneda is closer to Tokyo. And so whenever I'm doing like a bigger flight, like anything over 6 hours, my goal is to like make that trip as seamless as possible. So if I have to spend like a little bit more money to get a direct flight or get closer into the city center, to me, it is worth it. I think everyone has different things that they like to splurge on a trip. I don't need to fly first class, but I do like to have at least a direct flight if possible. That was a little vitamin C serum. I'm gonna let that dry down for a second before I go in with my sunscreen. It was an 11-hour flight direct, and we left at noon from San Francisco and arrived at 3 p.m. in Japan the next day. In our minds, when we landed, it was like, I don't know, felt like 1, 2 in the morning basically. And so my goal to kind of minimize the jet lag was to sort of stay up till at least like 7 p.m. in Japan so that we could just like go to sleep and have a really long, deep night's sleep and try to like reset ourselves and get ourselves on the proper time as quickly as possible. And that actually worked out pretty well. Now, granted, the next day we woke up incredibly early, and I'll get to that in a second. But once we landed in Japan, the biggest tip I have for you if you're going to Japan is you can preload your phone with basically a transit card that acts as a debit card so that when you're going in and out of the subway stations there, which is kind of the main way to get transportation, especially in Tokyo, you essentially just have to like tap your phone and you can preload that onto your phone. Ours was called a Suica card. There's one called Passmo, and each of those different types of cards is linked to a different type of American credit card. So you have to do a little bit of research. I think Suica links with at least American Express. I'm pretty sure I used my Amex. And the reason that's so important to preload your card is because when you arrive in the airport, at least for us, there was like what looked like a 2-hour line to get your subway ticket. And because we had preloaded our phones with money, we didn't have to like get a ticket. We could just like scan ourselves into the subway system and like get our train and be on our way to our hotel. So that is like one of the biggest tips I have. Ooh, another thing, if you're trying to make your time in the Japan airport go smoothly, is before your trip, you can go to the Japan Customs website and fill out essentially an online customs form. You know, a lot of times if you travel internationally, you can do that on the plane, like handwritten. But the advantage of doing it online ahead of time is then they will give you a QR code. And when you get to the airport, you can just kind of like scan your QR code through customs rather than having to do like a customs interview. You still have to stand in the customs line, but that was really nice. And also I just feel like, I don't know, I get quite discombobulated with travel. And so anything that I can do to sort of make my life easier once I arrive at my destination, I'm gonna do that. This is the Color Science Unforgettable Classic. I have used this for years, still really, really like it. So yeah, those are like the two main things. We got on the train and immediately I was like blown away by the train. Like, even though it was so packed as I expected it to be, I mean, Japan has a really high population density. Everyone was like just minding their own business. It was like almost silent on the train. Like, that was actually something I realized in Japan. I'm not actually a loud person, even though I might come off quite animated. Like, I feel like one of my personal pet peeves is when people can't like read the room. Like, if everyone else is being quiet, like you should be quiet. Or if everyone else is paying attention, you should pay attention. But my husband is so funny. It's one of the main reasons I fell in love with him. He is hilarious, like to the point where many times a day he makes me laugh out loud. And I don't think I realized like how much that happened until I was on the Japan subway, because he would just make a joke and I would just like laugh, not really thinking about it. And then I would realize like I'm the only person making noise here. And it was actually sort of mortifying, but just something to kind of realize. And then the trains are also immaculate. Like, everything is so pristine and clean. It's so funny because being like a West Coaster, I don't do a ton of public transportation. We have BART, and if you have ever ridden on BART, that's a hot mess. Or when I go to New York for work or to see friends, you know, I ride the subway there. But like, to me, that's always a stressful situation. It always feels so intense. Not only are the cars clean, are people polite, but also it's just like a very calm situation. Everyone's just like on a mission to go where they're going, and you feel incredibly safe. My patients have been asking me like, well, what was your favorite part of Japan? Absolutely impossible to choose. The whole vibe of Japan was incredible. But one thing is, you don't realize how much as a woman you fear for your safety, or you think about your safety in the back of your mind always. Like, even when I'm walking to my car in the parking garage at night, even during the day, sometimes I'm thinking like, okay, I've got my keys here. I know what I would do if someone came up to me. To not have to think really about your safety on a trip is amazing. Like, Japan is so safe. And of course, like, you always need some awareness, but to just sort of like mentally let your guard down a little bit, that just gave me such a load of relief and lifted a weight that I didn't even recognize that I was carrying. In Tokyo, we Sorry, coffee is essential. We stayed at the Trunk Hotel. Super cool hotel. Definitely has like an American feel. So did it feel like 100% authentic Japan? Maybe not, but it was very clean, pristine. Still obviously had lots of Japanese touches. They gave you pajamas to use, like all the little slippers for, like everything was just so cute. And it was kind of a smaller hotel. A lot of the hotels in Tokyo are like these huge high-rise buildings, which is fine, but we wanted to try something a little bit more intimate, and the Trunk Hotel in Tokyo was awesome. So we got to the hotel maybe around like 5 o'clock, took a quick shower, wanted to do like a quick turnaround, just kind of like get out and start exploring a little bit. We found this cool little stand-up sushi bar, which we're like, oh, this is so cool. We feel so authentic. And then we found out it was a chain, but still, it was really cool. The sushi was amazing. It was a great intro to Japan for sure. I'm going to go in with, I already used Color Science, but now these are like the more tinted versions, the Flex. I use the light and the medium, and I kind of mix them 1-to-1. A little bit goes such a long way. So I don't really use these as sunscreen. I'm using it sort of as like my foundation for today. And then the next day we woke up at like 5 in the morning, and we knew nothing would be open at 5 in the morning. So we just kind of hung out. We called my in-laws to check in on our son and kind of see how he did with his first night without us. Spoiler alert, he thrived the entire trip, like didn't really miss us at all, and was like a perfectly behaved angel for them. So I'm super happy about that. That was like the most important thing. And then we went and like walked around Tokyo in the morning. And this was the interesting thing. I figured like, oh, I'll get coffee, we'll walk around. Japanese coffee shops do not open until like 9:30, 10 a.m. And I was asking a guide, because we did some tours later, and I'll talk about that a little bit, but like, why is that? And he was saying that, you know, a lot of Japan culture is to like make your coffee at home and have it at home. There's a lot less like eating on the go, which was the other thing I noticed in Japan. Like no one's like eating a sandwich or a granola bar or drinking in the car or on the subway. Like everyone's just like on their way to their destination. And so yeah, the coffee shops were closed. So if you need coffee early in the morning in Japan, you need to go to one of the little convenience stores, like a 7-Eleven. There's one called Family Mart. There's one called Lawson's, and you get like a little coffee in a can. So it's maybe not ideal, but I was all ready to have like my first Japanese cappuccino, and then we struggled for a bit. But we went on a walk to the, I think they're called Meiji Shingu. It's like a shrine, and then it's in this like massive park. It feels like Central Park. The hotel was in Shibuya, and this was also in Shibuya. And that was such a lovely morning. Like the first morning to just like breathe in, spend time with my husband, walk through this beautiful like forested area with just people strolling, and just kind of like start looking around. Like I love people watching. I feel like in my day-to-day life, I have zero time to do that. Like I'm constantly interacting with patients, but you never get to just kind of sit back and enjoy the world. And that's what I really appreciate about vacation, is it just slows everything down. As I've gotten older and more involved in my career, like I just don't get those moments anymore. And I'm now coming back from Japan, I've really recognized that, because the juxtaposition of my daily life here versus when I was on vacation there was so starkly like different and obvious to me, that I really want to try to start taking a little bit more time for myself here. I don't know exactly how I'm going to figure out how to do that. If you're a mom and you work and you figured out a way to like get time to yourself, please let me know in the comments, because I feel like I desperately need it. Gosh, the coverage on that is so nice. Like I don't wear a ton of foundation on a day-to-day basis, but if I still need coverage, like for example, I'm talking on a podcast later today, and I think they're going to be recording it video-wise as well. Like that's enough coverage for me. That first day in Japan, we also went to this neighborhood called Roppongi and went to this amazing little izakaya spot that one of my best friends, who is a total foodie, like had found on Instagram. I was like, you guys should go here. It was amazing. It was so intimate. And I think a lot of people were like, how was the food? How was the food? I mean, I love Japanese food. Living in California, and especially in the Bay Area, there is an incredible amount of all types of Asian food that is incredibly authentic. So it wasn't just, it's not like I haven't had great Japanese food before, but it to me is about the entire experience, like the ambiance, being in these small little intimate restaurants with low ceilings and kind of dimmer lights. I mean, I will link, some restaurant or like put them in the description box, because I want to make sure I get the names right and everything, but it was so delicious. The best tempura for sure that I've had in my entire life. Like so light, so crisp, so flavorful. I was like, oh, we are in Japan. Like this is amazing. Everyone else in the restaurant was Japanese. Like that's also to me like a great sign. And that was fabulous. Get those brows. Wow, you probably didn't need to see my face that close. This is the Kosas brow pencil. So good. So we did that for lunch. And then in the afternoon, we went to something called Team Lab Planets. if you're going to Tokyo, I highly, highly recommend this. If you look on like TikTok or Instagram for Team Lab Planets, you will see all these little videos. It's like a complete immersive art experience, like sound, touch. You're going from room to room with like bright sparkly lights, and then you're wading through pools. So you're doing it barefoot. Just so if you're like I don't want to be barefoot in public type of person, this will not be for you, but the water's clean, whatever. Like you just got to go with it. Incredible. I thought it was going to be like a total tourist trap. And yes, there were a lot of tourists there, but it was super, super cool. And that was kind of our afternoon spent there. I mean, amazing. I totally recommend that. It was so fun. I do think you need to buy tickets in advance. Like it does sell out because it is so amazing. So if you're thinking about going to Japan, just make sure you check that out. And that was kind of our first day. For dinner, I think we went to Ichiran, which is like the very famous ramen chain there. And like, I cannot eat ramen every day. I'm not used to such a salt hit on my system, but of course we had to go. And yeah, it was delicious. The other thing is my husband and I are we're not like full on vegetarian, like we eat fish and stuff. Occasionally I will have like a little bit of chicken or something, but almost never. But when I travel, kind of all bets are off. I really feel like in a travel situation, I'm just trying to like experience things. So if there's something that has pork or beef or whatever, and I find it interesting and I want to experience it, like my dietary restrictions are like very loose in that sense. Like I don't want to miss out on like an opportunity because of that. So you see how you can make this like little line across the bottom with this pencil, and then it's soft. So you can then like push that up into the brows, and it just gives the best coverage and color. So good. Now the next day in Tokyo, we booked an Airbnb experience. If you have never used Airbnb for their experiences, so not just to like book a place to stay, but to do an experience, I totally recommend it. My husband and I have done this in many different countries. Like in Italy, we had an amazing pasta making class that we did through an Airbnb experience. And this Tokyo one was super cool. It was a tour of the fish markets and like the tuna auction, which happens at like 6 a.m. It's like tuna that are flown in from all over the world. Like our tour guide was saying that some of the best tuna are actually caught off the coast of Boston, but then they are flown into Tokyo because fishermen can get like the best price there. Like people will pay the most money for it. And he was talking through the different types of tuna and like which tuna is used for sashimi versus like supermarket stuff. And it was all very, very interesting. And I like Airbnb experiences because it's not just a private tour. Like there's usually, 4 to 7 other people on the trip. And it's just a cool way to meet other travelers. And even if it's not a perfect experience, it's always an experience that is very memorable. So totally recommend checking that out. It was awesome. I'm going to go in with some brow gel now. This one is by Make. Such a good brow gel. They have a tinted version that's brown, but this is the clear one. And to me, the brush is cool. Like it's got these longer bristles and then these shorter ones. And this holds your brows all day long. So the fish market was super cool. You have to get there very early in the morning, and I actually wanted to do it kind of early on in our trip in Tokyo because we were still naturally getting up really early because of the time change and still getting tons of sleep. So that worked out very, very well, but we had to wake up at like 4:30 in the morning, which is not usually my type of like vacation activity. And then after we went to sort of what's called the new fish market, we went to this older fish market. I think it's called Tsujuki. I'm going to double check that. And that is totally full of tourists, but it's all these outdoor stands that have like mochi and matcha and tamagoyaki and Kobe beef and all these things. And you can try them. And I still recommend going. Like to me, just because something has a lot of tourists doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. Sometimes it has a lot of tourists because it's an interesting place to go. And like, do I need to go back there? No, I got the vibe, but it was a cool experience. And again, like having the guide there was very cool. And then after we went to both of those fish markets, he took us back to his kind of personal home in Tokyo and kind of cooked us this like meal with all of the fish that we had gotten. And a lot of it actually wasn't cooked. It was eaten as like sashimi. It was just such an interesting experience. It was more fish than I've eaten in one meal ever in my life and ever will again. But again, an experience. And then in the afternoon, we went to Ginza, which is sort of like a high-end shopping district. And it's not because I wanted to buy a bunch of designer bags on this trip, but just to kind of like, again, look around, see the people, meander. Like, I just loved that I did not have to feel rushed or be efficient in any way on this trip. Go in there, a little bit of concealer. So I will talk about this more if I ever do an in-depth makeup tutorial video or an updated one, but where I put my concealer is often where, when I'm doing a cosmetic intervention on somebody, we put filler actually, because we're trying to bring those areas up towards the light. Let that become tacky a little bit. This is the Prisma Libre Givenchy concealer. So glad I picked this up. This is as fantastic as everyone says. This is shade N120. Amazing. When we were in Ginza, we also went to the Meiji flagship store, which is sort of like, think of it like Japanese IKEA. They have absolutely everything. And again, that was just like so fun to walk around in and see. And we just like grabbed dinner somewhere local. We did not book a lot of fancy dinners in Japan. That's the other thing, or fancy meals in general. I feel like if I want a Michelin star Japanese restaurant, we have those in California. And I just wanted to eat at like the most sort of like hole in the wall, authentic local places as possible. I think everyone has a different mission when they go to Japan. And if you want to go eat fancy Japanese food, that's obviously going to be amazing, but that wasn't necessarily our priority, nor were we on top enough of our shit. Like you have to book a lot of that stuff like really far in advance. And we had all the plans in the world to book a lot of things in advance, but just having a young kid and our jobs are both really busy. A lot of the planning we did for Japan, aside from like the big, experiences and attraction stuff, like figuring out food, figuring out like the specific day-to-day plan, we actually did while we were there, because again, it's vacation, you have downtime. So the next day in Tokyo was actually our final day in Tokyo. It was like, we had like a half day when we landed, 2 full days. And then our plan on the 4th day in our trip was to like go to Kyoto and then spend a little time in Tokyo on the way back. And it was pouring that morning. I did not realize how lucky we got with our weather on our trip. I think like mid to late October is prime time to travel to Japan, because it was like 70 and sunny and just beautiful the entire time. And some of our very good friends were in Japan just a month before in September, and it was sweltering, like 100 degrees every day. And we did so many outdoor activities and just spent so much time walking outside that I think it would have been like a little bit more miserable if it had been that hot. Plus, I feel like when it's that hot, you just get drained so much more easily. It's hard to have stamina for the entire travel day. And so I think visiting Japan on the shoulder seasons, whether that's like late spring, early fall, before it gets really cold, it's a nice way to do it. I do want to go back to Japan in the winter though, to like ski. And I think looking at photos, like Japan in winter seems so magical. But I think if you're going for the first time and you plan on doing a lot of these types of little outings and things like that, optimizing the rain situation, of course, we couldn't have gotten luckier. It's not like we could plan for that. It was just incredible. So it was raining hard in Japan that morning. We couldn't really like do a ton of walking or whatever. So we kind of just hung out in the hotel, grabbed breakfast at Trunk. That was the other nice thing. Our hotel had like American and Japanese breakfast options. I absolutely love Japanese food, but it doesn't matter what cuisine it is. I cannot eat it for every single meal, every single day. And so it was kind of nice to get like a little avocado toast or a little bit of fruit or something like that. I'm just not used to having as much salt in my diet. And so if you're eating like gyoza, tempura, ramen, udon, sashimi, any type of sushi, all of that, like it's so good, but I feel like having a little bit of variety was nice. So we grabbed breakfast at the hotel. This is the Kosas powder. This is great powder, just has a little bit of coverage. The only thing I don't like is sometimes I find the packaging a little bit hard to open, especially if you have fragile nails or fake nails like I do. And then we grabbed the bullet train to Kyoto. And that was such a cool experience. One of the things I was looking forward to the most in Japan was like going on the bullet train, and totally lived up to the hype. I recommend getting to the train station a bit early, maybe like 45 minutes early, so you can just walk around the train station, because that's also very interesting and you kind of want to make sure you know where you're going. But also there's like a ton of food stalls, so you can pick up like a bento box to eat on the train and snacks and all of that. And so that just felt like a fun experience. And so we had all of our little snacks and goodies. The train's only like 2.5 hours, but you always need food. And since we were going over lunchtime, that seemed like a good idea. And it was perfect. We took the train, looked out the window, like the sights were so gorgeous. Once we arrived in Kyoto, we were able to take public transportation to our hotel. And there's definitely some like walking in between trains and things like that. So if you're going to Japan and you plan on switching hotels a lot, like it might be nice to pack light. Also, if you're in the subway stations, there are escalators in some of them, but they sometimes don't have them or they're hard to find. And so things that are easy to carry is helpful. There is a service in Japan where you can actually I don't know if you have to pay for it, but your hotel can like send your bags along and forward them essentially to the next hotel. I don't know if I have that kind of trust, although everything in Japan was so efficient. I honestly don't don't doubt it. We stayed the first couple nights in Kyoto in the Hotel Mitsui. Our friends went there, and I also had 2 patients who recommended it. And I was like, this sounds amazing. It's a beautiful hotel. It was built during the pandemic, and it's just so refined. It's beautiful. It's built on top of a natural hot spring. And so there's these thermal baths in sort of the basement of the hotel where the spa is. So cool. All of the onsen, so like the spas and stuff in Japan tend to be separated by gender because you go in nudie duty. But this one was combined, like all genders basically. And so you just wore a swimsuit. And so that was a really nice treat because I feel like when I'm going to relax in an onsen, it would be nice to be able to like talk to my partner since we don't get that much time to just chit chat on the day to day because we're running around with our lives and child and all of that. So that was an amazing experience. That hotel was just absolutely fantastic. The room was beautiful. We got like a free upgrade, which was so cool. And then the breakfast there was incredible, like a full-on buffet. You could do a Japanese buffet. You could do it an American breakfast, all the fresh fruit and goodies and everything you could ever want. So that was just highly, highly recommend. Totally like a spendier hotel, but to me, that so contributed to like an amazing Japan trip. Oh, also, this is the Hourglass Luminous Bronze, one of my favorite bronzers ever. I recommended it in my Sephora sale video as well. Our second day in Kyoto, we did an e-bike tour, which we also booked through Airbnb. Totally recommend. The tour, also e-biking, so fun. I don't know if I can ever go back to a regular bicycle again. And this was like a 3.5-hour tour. I really like doing tours on like the first or second day that you're in a city because to me, it gives you context. Like that took us all over the city. We got to visit temples and shrines. So shrines are part of the Shinto religion. Temples are part of Buddhism, which are kind of the 2 main religions practiced in Japan. And our guide was actually an expat from the UK, but is married to a Japanese woman, has been living in Japan for, I think he had lived there for about 10 years and had just a ton of knowledge. He was super passionate about Kyoto specifically and just getting all the history and seeing all of the sites. And then also to get recommendations, right? Like if you meet someone who's a local on one of your early days on the trip, then you can get restaurant recommendations, sites to see, things to maybe like skip or that are like hyped up online and aren't all that. So that was a super cool, very fun trip. I would not consider myself like a strong cycler. I mean, Peloton, but that's different than like being on the street with cars and things like that. And this was a really, really fun experience. And then actually we did a second experience through Airbnb on the same day, which would not be like my perfect situation, but I think when I was booking it, those were like the only days left of these tours. So again, if you're on top of it, book things more in advance than I did. And in the evening, we did a foodie night tour through Kyoto. So again, met a guide. This was like such a fun group of people that were on our night tour, probably because it was like a alcohol and food tour. And so we went to like a sake bar. We went to Nishiki Market, which is one of the main markets in Kyoto. Went to a couple different restaurants and just sampled things. And our guides were super funny. And like everyone we were with, it was just like a really, really fun night. So it's not to say that like I can't have a great time out with my husband alone, but it is fun to like meet other travelers, see like what they've done before, all of that. So I found that to be like quite enriching. And then we didn't have any other like scheduled things for the rest of our time in Kyoto, and we could really just take advantage of the recommendations and stuff that other people had given us. The next day in Kyoto, we went to hike at Fushimi Inari. If you have ever seen any like touristy photos of Japan where there's people posing with like orange gates, I'm sure I have a photo too. That is Fushimi Inari. It's thousands and thousands of these orangish red torii gates around all these shrines up in like the trees and forest. It is actually so beautiful. I had one guide who was like, maybe you don't need to go there because it's pretty touristy. And when you first arrive, yes, there are a lot of tourists there. Like any sort of like hiking thing with stairs, when you go up further, the tourists sort of thin out. And I thought it was so beautiful, the contrast between walking through this like kind of mystical Japanese forest and then with the orange gates, and then there are these like moss covered shrines. It was absolutely stunning. Like my husband and I kept looking at each other being like, is this real? Is this real? And it was also like great exercise. Definitely like a little bit of a thigh burner, but so awesome. And then later that day, we went back to the Mitsui and went back in the hot springs. Wanted to like take full advantage of that. And then we actually ended up switching hotels to the Ace Hotel. We just wanted to try a couple different ones. And the Ace Hotel was kind of a more modern, sort of like eclectic vibe. Lots of like younger tourists and things like that were staying there, but also like an awesome hotel, and actually in a more kind of like hubby part of Kyoto where there seemed to be like more going on, more shops nearby. So that was another nice thing about being at Ace, is there was just like a lot of stuff to do nearby. That next day when we were in Kyoto, we took the train out to Nara, which is the old capital of Japan. And Nara is really famous for having just thousands and thousands of free roaming tame deer. So the city does smell like a bit like a petting zoo, but it's so cool. Like if you're an animal person, and I actually wouldn't even, like, I'm not an animal person, it was still really amazing. I live in, Northern California, and there are deer like roaming our neighborhood, but I'm actually terrified of those deer, and they are enormous. And these deer were like so calm, they bow to you. So you go up to them and you kind of bow to them, and then they will bow to you, and you can buy like food to feed them. And it was just such an interesting experience. If I go back to Japan, even though I don't want to go to every single place I've been to, I would want to bring my son there. I think he would think it was just kind of magical. It takes about an hour to get to Nara, maybe slightly more. And I don't know, I feel like when you're on vacation, you might be like, I don't want to waste like an hour, traveling, because I've already been traveling so much on the trip. But I think when you're on vacation, your days are so long and there aren't other obligations. And so to me, every time I was on a train, I'm just like, this is time that I can just relax. So Nara also is home to the largest bronze Buddha statue in the world. And it's like a separate sort of attraction that you have to pay to get into. I shouldn't really call it an attraction, but it kind of is. My husband and I are like, should we go see it? Like, it's just a Buddha. Totally do it. It's also contained within, I think they said, the largest all wooden structure in the world. And it's pretty impressive. Like, you go in, this Buddha is 45 feet tall. It weighs 1 million pounds. And it was just kind of overwhelming to sit there and see that. It was amazing. And to think that this was built so many years ago, and to think how they were able to accomplish that. I mean, it was very, very interesting. And again, I will give a shout out to the amazing weather. There's not a lot of shade in Nara, not a lot of shade structures. So if you're trying to do that on a day when it's 100 degrees with lots of animals roaming around, might not sound like a good time to people, but I think it was totally worth it to go out there. Loved it. And then we came back to Kyoto and just sort of meandered, found a really cool little ramen shop to duck into. A lot of the ramen shops there, you order on what looks sort of like an ATM, and then oftentimes we'll go upstairs to a second story where a lot of the restaurants are located to actually eat it. And this was a little place we were just sort of wandering by, and there's a lot of flags or wooden gates in front of Japanese restaurants, so they can be kind of hidden and tucked away. And my husband just saw a standalone ATM, and we're like, what? But then we saw a couple Japanese people lined up there. So we're like, let's be nosy, annoying tourists. And so we kind of go inside. It's just this little ATM. And we're like, well, where are people eating? But again, upstairs. And you go upstairs and it's all an open kitchen restaurant. That was not something we had researched ahead of time. I'll put the name of it though in the description box. That was a very cool little experience, and something you always dream, I feel as a tourist, at least I do, of stumbling upon a little hole in the wall that's so cool and no one ever told you about. And that's what that felt like to me. That was a great night. Kyoto is also home to some of the most famous bars in the world, and apparently has super cool bar culture. We honestly weren't staying up late enough to really enjoy the bars, but I feel if I were to go back to Japan, I would shift my schedule, because we were getting up really early and going to bed early and just trying to get as much sleep as possible, because we basically haven't slept through the night in 2 years. Thank you, Theo. And so I would kind of try to shift the trip and do more nightlife, because I think that is a whole other part of Japan that we didn't really get to explore, but I think would be really cool. The next day in Kyoto, we took a train up to this mountain town. I think it's a town called Kurama, and you hike between these shrines. It was so cool. I loved the balance we struck on our trip between city and town life and kind of outdoorsy time. Even in the cities, we were walking a ton, so it wasn't that, but just to get those glimpses of greenery and just sort of experience that. And also, it really felt like going up on that train through the mountains, where it's this tiny little train and all these trees are going by. It felt like I was in a Japanese fairy tale or a Studio Ghibli movie. I don't know if you've ever seen Totoro or any of those, but that's really what it felt like. It was very cool. And that was a hike that you could have made a 10-mile hike or a 5-mile hike. We found it on the All Trails app. We hike a lot in the Bay Area, and so All Trails is our favorite app to use, but it works abroad as well. And so we did that hike, got ice cream, which was amazing afterward, and then made our way back to Kyoto. And that was just such a nice way to spend kind of the first half of that day. And then in the afternoon, we actually went back to the Mitsui, even though we're staying at the Ace Hotel, to get massages, because when we were down in the spa, we're this looks really nice. And I don't know, I used to be I don't want to spend money on massages. I don't want to indulge myself so much on vacation. And now I'm just YOLO to the max. And I'm so so happy that I did that. That was just an awesome experience. The most comfortable massage bed I've ever laid on. Like normally when I have to put my head down through the donut, about half an hour in, I'm like, I can't breathe. But the table was amazing. The woman's touch was like so tender. Like great massage. This Real Technique's tapered cheek brush, by the way, so nice for applying cream blushes. It just feels like a little bit more dense than a typical blush brush that I would use, and it's awesome. The next day we took the bullet train back from Kyoto to Tokyo and just kind of spent the day wandering around Tokyo. We went back to a different hotel. We stayed at some like random thing. It was just going to be for one night before we flew out of Tokyo the next day, maybe like Tokyo, Hilton. I'll double check with my husband, but it wasn't anything memorable or special really in any way. And that was actually in Shinjuku, which is a different neighborhood than Shibuya, which is where we started off. And that Shinjuku felt much more like a business type district, like huge billboards, really busy streets. I mean, not that that wasn't occurring in Shibuya as well, I guess I should say, but that was the day I did like most of my skincare shopping. I had kind of put it off for the whole trip, and I'd like duck into stores and be like, is that what I want to get? Is that what I want to get? And then finally I was like, okay, we're getting down to crunch time here. I need to like just pick some things out. And so I did that. That was our final day. We went to the Shinjuku Botanical Gardens, which are also really beautiful. I don't know why. I just have a thing for botanical gardens. Like I always enjoy them. I find them so peaceful. They're so gorgeous. The weather again was like absolutely amazing. And then that night we actually went back to that standing sushi spot that we went to on our first night in Tokyo. So I feel like we came like full circle. It wasn't the same one because remember it's a chain. That time we like knew how to order. We knew like how to say thank you the right way. Like we felt like, oh yeah, we know how to do this. Like that was kind of fun. Then we went just back to the hotel, kind of packed up our things. We only did carry on the way there. And then I brought like a big Longchamp bag with me in my suitcase that I knew we would fill up with stuff that we bought along the way. Like my husband got a really nice kitchen knife. We brought back tons of candy, obviously lots of skincare. And so we did check a bag on the way home, and that worked out well. Wow, it's really hard to talk and put on lip liner. I don't know how real influencers do this. So yeah, that was like basically our Japan trip on our last day. We left Tokyo a little bit early just to get to the airport with plenty of time. I'm the chill traveler. My husband is the more like slightly anxious, but very organized and super grateful for him traveler. And so we just got there early, like hung out in a lounge. I got some work done because I was like, okay, I'm coming back from vacation. I still have like patient things to catch up on from before I left, because I really, really tried on vacation to just not work, not respond to work emails. That was the longest I've gone without working since maternity leave. And it was just amazing. Like not working for a short period of time is like highly, highly recommend. This is the Serum Balm Intense by Make in shade Nude Nova. These serum balms, I feel like they do not get enough shout outs. They're so amazing. So pigmented, so creamy on the lips. Yeah, so good. But yes, Japan was absolutely the trip of a lifetime. I was like, well, I'm gonna do this get ready video. I should probably talk about like my highs and my lows of the trip. Literally my only lows were like missing my son. And even then I was able to try to kind of like think of it like, there's nothing I can change. Like he's not here. So just sit in the moment and be with your partner and take that time for you guys. And so that was fantastic, but we had great weather. We had great food. No one got sick. Like it was truly like a dream trip. And if you're thinking about going to Japan, I can't recommend it enough. It was such an easy place to travel to. Like it felt so different than what I'm used to in the US, yet felt so approachable, even though of course I don't know any Japanese. Oh, that's another tip I have. Download the Google Translator app. You can hold it up to any like Japanese text on a menu, or I used it a lot when I was shopping for skincare to just get a translation. So that's another thing that I found to be really helpful to have on board as long as you have Wi-Fi or internet service in that area. Just gonna grab a little bit of K18 hair oil here. That'll finish off the hair. But yes, Japan was amazing. If you've been there before and you have any recommendations or travel tips or anything, definitely put it in the comments. If you have any recommendations of where my husband and I should do our next trip to, also put it in the comments. We were thinking maybe Portugal, I don't know. But yes, I feel just so lucky to have had that opportunity. Thanks so much for hanging out with me during this Get Ready. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and I will catch you next time.